All right. So then, hello and good afternoon, everyone, to our today's webinar on Ecocide. And before we finally start with our webinar discussing the Russian ecocide in Ukraine and the ways to prevent it, to counter it, to find it, let me quickly introduce some house rules for today. As you have seen, this webinar is being recorded and the discussion will last around an hour plus some minutes. We will see how much there is also a demand and an appetite for questions and answers, live streamed. And each panelist at the moment, at the beginning, has prepared a short presentation, around 7-8 minutes, and which then will be followed by a question and answer session. We're still waiting for our fourth panelist, Ina Sufsun. She was supposed to be with us from 2 o'clock on, but her flight was delayed and she told me she might join only at 2:20, 2:25, but there is somebody for her in the webinar and taking notes so she knows what we had been saying before. And of course, all the viewers, the audience can use the Q&A function in the Zoom to send us your questions. We will try then to respond to all of them, if possible. Please do it in writing. And if somebody insists, of course, we can also open the microphone for you. You can do this orally. So please, now we go into the discussion. You have followed this situation and development of the last weeks. Russia's war of aggression is causing an immense suffering, not only to the people and infrastructure of Ukraine, but especially and also to its flora and fauna. The scale of destruction is often described as ecocide. Russia has illegally logged and burned unique Ukrainian forest, virgin forests, primary forests sometimes, contaminated water, air, and soil in a large extent, mined thousands of kilometers, hectares of kilometers of land, destroyed countless wild animals, pets, and livestock. The terrorist attack on the Kakhovka Dam was the latest, but not the last of ecocide committed by Russia. We need to discuss how to deal with the consequences of this Russian ecocide, but also how to prevent further damage. How should we respond to Russia's actions? How much damage has been done and it is irreversible, or maybe it is reversible? Especially the situation now is the Zaporizhzhya nuclear power plants. How much is it under threat? And what role should environmental concerns play in Ukraine's reconstruction? These and many more questions will be now answered by our panelists. And let me quickly and briefly introduce them. First, we will have an introduction by Olena Kravchenko. She is an ecology expert from Ukraine, director of environmental people law, and will inform us about the extent and the scale of damage done by the Ukrainian environment to the Ukrainian environment by the Russians. Very welcome, Olena, here in our little debate. Second today will be Tobias Münchmeyer. He has started again at Greenpeace in the office here in Berlin, and he's running the European project of Greenpeace, Green Recovery of Ukraine. He will give us a short introduction on the value of the unique Ukrainian ecosystems for Europe, but he also will draw upon on the situation of the nuclear power station. Then we have with us, and I'm very honored that he made it, Anton Hofreiter. He is currently the chairman of the EU Affairs Committee in the German Bundestag, and well known, I think, by many Germans, but also by many Ukrainians, since he was very, very vocal of a lot of also military support for Ukraine. And of course, he's a biologist by training. He has even a doctorate degree there. and he knows a lot about ecocide, not just in Ukraine. He will provide a broader perspective on the tools Germany and the EU have at their disposal to prevent further crimes, as well as the importance of Ukraine's green recovery. As I said, we're still waiting for our colleague from the Ukrainian Rada, who actually gave the initiative for this webinar, who's very vocal and very outspoken on this ecocide for quite some time, Ina Sovtsum. She's from the group Golos, and she will then highlight the efforts being made by the Ukrainian side to combat ecocide and the help they need from the international community. So for now, Olena, the floor is yours. Please start with your presentation.
Thank you. Can you see my presentation? Today I will talk about Ukrainian civil society like a voice for the global environmental security.
Olena, sorry, the screen is white. Sorry to say, it worked before, but now it's white. I don't know what happened.
Hi, Olena, I think you're sharing whiteboard. Maybe you could use the share screen function.
Not so.
Okay, otherwise okay. I can gladly take over and share your presentation. Yes, please start again.
Yes, please. Share my presentation or I? Is it good? Can I start?
Yes, please. Perfect. Thank you.
The war in Ukraine is a catastrophe for the environmental in global terms. The environmental knows no borders, and circulation of air, of water, and migration of species spread the impact of the war worldwide. And so it's vitally important to ensure effective overcoming of environmental consequences of the war and truly green recovery. Death of the people during the death of the people during the war is the most horrible things, but Kakhovka Dam is widely sure that several environmental consequences are also deadly and also kill people, even also not always seen it's immediately. Bad pictures of drifting houses, dead people and animals, flooded thousands of hectares of our soil, areas fully covered with dead fish, completely devastated town and villages show just of the part damage caused of the environmental by the war. Water poisoning with chemicals from the missile, agriculture with fuels from damaged ships, unexploited mines, dead animals get to the Black Sea, which is common for many other countries, and through spread the deadly effects globally. Let's talk about the impact on soil. Ukrainian contains 1/4 of the world's black soil reserves in the fact that it's severely damaged and polluted with toxic substances, and minus poses global as Ukrainian is the breadbasket for the whole world. 30% of the territory of Ukraine is contaminated with exploited close objects and needs demining measures. This is 176,000 square kilometers. Remediation and demining will take decades, and some territory are so badly damaged and their recovery is hardly possible, or maybe it's just impossible to recover this land. War also did big impact on the forest. Missile strikes, heavy bombing caused huge forest fires, which means not only thousands of hectares of burned forest, but also destructed whole ecosystem and killed flora and fauna, including red book species. According to the Accounting Chamber of Ukraine, as of the end of 2022, 3 million hectares of forest have been destructed, which is almost the third of all Ukrainian forest. This definitely means big impact on the global climate. War also did big impact, unfortunately, on our biodiversity. The implication of damage, I cannot see my... the implication of damage and toxic contamination from fighting are especially grave, given that Ukraine is home to 35% of Europeans' biodiversity, and hundreds of protected areas are or have been under the occupation, including up to 23 or more national parks and nature and biosphere reserves. Biodiversity loss caused by the war is unpredicted, and scientists state that at least 2 and the maximum 6 species disappeared forever because of the war. This implication of damage and toxic contamination from fighting and are especially grave that Ukrainian has a lot of biodiversity. Mussels, strikes, fires, chemical spills, damage to vegetation, including rare and endangered species. Because the war is destruction for migration ways for many species of birds, hostilities can cause a global reduction in number at the level of Europe and even of the world. This also applies to globally disappeared species. Ukraine had huge environmental problems before the war, but unprecedented damage to the environmental cost by the war makes environmental aspect the issue of survival not only for Ukraine, but for the whole world. Sadly, the system of environmental governance and institutional capacity for relevant authorities are far too weak to deal with the problem of this catastrophic scale. Non-finalized key institutional and sectoral environmental reforms make perspective of truly green recovery a fiction. Environment is about life, as there is no compromise for life. It's vitally important that environmental dimension gets due attention and becomes a priority Ukrainians' post-war recovery process. Consolidation of efforts of national and international stakeholders is needed to ensure real progress in implementation of environmental reforms as a key precondition of Ukrainian green recovery. Without this precondition, it's impossible to make real green recovery. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very precise and very comprehensive, on the other hand, introduction, dear Olena. We would continue first now with Tobias' introduction, and then Anton, Tony, and then we wait for Iner and come up with a Q&A session. So Tobias, if you don't mind, you can immediately continue.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for the invitation. This is a very very current and timely topic and very worrying Greenpeace, as many other environmental organizations and as the population in Ukraine, of course, because we are talking about the destruction of Europe's treasure box in terms of biodiversity. 70,000 species, plants and animal species have their home in Ukraine, which is at the geographical center of Europe, as we all know. It's home to bisons, to brown bears, to lynx, to wolves, to sturgeons, to many, many threatened species. Their unique steppe and unique dense forest habitats under pressure. And what we see as a collateral damage, let's say, is destruction of large territories. We're speaking of 1.2 million hectares, like 30% of the protected areas, which are affected by shelling and bombing and oil pollution and all kinds of military maneuvers. Fires are adding to the pressure. 100,000 hectares are destroyed by fires. Fires are always happening, but this is like 80 times more than in a peaceful time. And it has more indirect effects also on biodiversity in the sense that the rangers who are keeping the control over the protected areas are, of course, conscripted to the army. So many protected areas, for very good reasons, cannot be managed, cannot be operated as in peace times. On top of that, there are refugees in some parts of the Carpathian Mountains, adding to the pressure on the nature. So we are speaking about alone 15,000 people of internally displaced persons in the Carpathian Mountains. So all this is adding up to the horrors of this war. But I would see that as a very, very important topic, but not as part of ecocide in the literal sense, because in my understanding, ecocide is not about the scale of destruction, but it is about the character of destruction. And ecocide is, in our definition, when environmental destruction is used deliberately as a weapon. And we have examples, unfortunately, examples for that as well. And I would like to draw your attention to three examples. That is Kakhovka, that is Chernobyl, or Chernobyl, better to say, and this is Zaporizhzhya. Kakhovka, I will not repeat what Mrs. Kravchenko said very convincingly with all the details, but that is, in my view, in our view, a classic. Yeah, this explosion of the Kakhovka dam had the purpose to cause environmental destruction, large scale and long term. So that was not a bilateral collateral damage, but that was the purpose. So this fulfills fully the definition of ecocide. Let me say some words about Chernobyl. Maybe a little bit less attention was paid to it in the last couple of months, but as you might remember, in February, March, it was on the top of the agenda. Since in the very first week, I think it was on the second day of the war on February 25th, Chernobyl was occupied by the Russian army, who stayed there for 5 weeks. In May, there was an IAEA delegation investigating the consequences of the Russian army building trenches and having occupied all the buildings and the shut down reactors at Chernobyl, coming to the conclusion that everything was under control. However, Greenpeace sent a mission in early July, a very, very difficult, I must say, mission, 10 people to Chernobyl to do the monitoring, and found out that IAEA has severely underestimated the real consequences, that in real terms, the radioactivity which could be measured was on a factor up to 50 times higher than claimed by IAEA. But even more, the consequences are severe until today and for the coming years. Why is this the case? Because Chernobyl is not under control, has never been under control, but at least it has been monitored. Since 1986, a lot of scientific work, thanks to which it was possible to see how radioactivity contamination was spread, was moving, how, to which degree water from the cooling pond, contaminated water was leaked into the then in the next step also into the Dnipro river. Now, monitoring in large territories of the Chernobyl zone is impossible. Why? Because people cannot go there because of mining, because the Russians left so many mines in the Chernobyl zone. So we are now, actually, we are in a flying blindly concerning the control over Chernobyl zone, because we cannot do the monitoring. And this is even more critical because since many years we almost got used to the fact that in March, April, May, there were severe fires in the Chernobyl zone. From time to time, even reaching with the smoke up to Kiev, 90 kilometers south. Then firefighters were always sent in. Now firefighters cannot go. Why? Because of the mines again. Yeah. So these indirect consequences are also proofs for elements of ecocide. And now, coming to the end, we are speaking about Zaporizhzhya in the last, actually already a long time, but especially in the last couple of days, especially from last week on, since even IAEA, after denying the fact, was acknowledging that there is at least a mine, if not more mines, planted close to the cooling pond of Zaporizhzhya nuclear power plant. So this is now a scenario we need to deal with, and people in Ukraine need to deal with, but also European international community needs to deal with the threat posed by either a mine being exploded at the cooling pond or electricity connection to Zaporizhzhya being cut off, which is now already with one 330 kilowatt power line connected. And this is instrumental. Yes, what many people don't understand, the 6 reactors of this biggest nuclear power plant in Europe are shut down. But the nuclear fuel is still in the reactor vessels and it's still in the cooling ponds, and it needs constantly cooling. And a loss of cooling water could lead, not in a Chernobyl scenario of a couple of minutes or hours, but over days, to very, very serious nuclear accidents. And therefore, this is a threat to the population in Ukraine and even the neighboring countries. And this is also a deliberate use of potential possible environmental catastrophe as a weapon, and therefore fulfills the criteria of ecocide. So it is right to say the Russian military, in this case even supported by Rosatom, which is part of the military force, one must say, they have appeared at Chernobyl and at Zaporizhzhya on the very first day of the Russian army entering these places, that they are deliberately posing these risks to the population. Thank you.
No, thank you for this. I mean, that sounds extremely scary, and I know, and this is my first question to Tony and everything else. So we do not only have a problem with the Russian troops and the ecocide, but obviously we have also a problem with the institution when we know that the deputy head of the International Atomic Energy Association is obviously a Russian, and the guy Grossi, the head of the EIA, is definitely influenced by a lot of Russian interest, and that doesn't make the life easier for poor Ukrainians, and for good reason. They're constantly complaining about the bias of the atomic agency. But now the floor is yours. Please, Tony, give us your remarks and your comments on the topic here.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the invitation, and thanks a lot for what we already heard. We are now talking about ecocide and the destruction of the nature caused by the war, and by the destruction of the nature which is used as a weapon. And we already heard about 3 examples of this: the destroying of the dam, the things the Russian army have done in Chernobyl, and now we also see they are doing or mining the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhya. And I think one thing is that we have all the horribles of the war in Ukraine now, but one of the big problems of the destroying of the nature is that it will bring Ukraine similar to the many mines the Russian army have brought into to the soil of Ukraine. It will bring Ukraine problems even a long time when the war has hopefully as fast as possible stopped. And I think that so far the answer of the democratic West was too weak, what the Russian army has done. We have not reacted clear enough on what they have done by destroying the dam. I think our answer should have been that we say now we do even more to help Ukraine and be louder to what Russia has done. And when it comes to the threat against the nuclear power plants, I don't know if everybody is aware of it, but so far we have not any kind of sanctions against nuclear power industry in Russia. We even have no sanctions against Rosatom. So I think one of the most important issues on this topic is that we put more pressure within the European Union, within Germany, within France, that we come to really powerful sanctions against Rosatom and the nuclear industry of Russia, because it's one of the really black holes of the sanction regime of Europe against Russia. And we have surprised ourselves that we have now more sanction packages, and the European Union was holding stronger together than everybody has expected. I think that even the European Union has expected. But the nuclear industry is one of the industries which is left out. And a second thing, I think we should have to communicate more clearer to Russia that when they do anything in Zaporizhzhya, it's similar to an attack with a tactical nuclear bomb, and that there will be an answer by the West. We need harsh deterrence against Russia, that they don't directly use Zaporizhzhya and blow it up as a kind of a weapon. And I think that has been done fastly. I think we also have to speak even more clearer with the Chinese government, that they understand that not only a tactical atomic bomb will be a red line, but also it will be a red line to attack directly Zaporizhzhya or another nuclear power plant, because the effects of a blowing up of a nuclear power plant can be even more devastating than a tactical nuclear bomb. And I think we here need in this field clear deterrence. And I think that we also have to put on or to speak with the Americans, because they are the most important partners here for this deterrence, but also the Chinese are important. So I think two things we have to do, or three things we have to do. On the long term, we have to help Ukraine to clear the mess, especially in Chernobyl, the destruction of the dam and the many mines. The second thing, we have to look on a kind of justice. The third thing, we have to bring in more sanctions, also in civil atomic industry against Russia. And the fourth thing, we have to clearly communicate against Russia that attacking Zaporizhzhya is a red line.
Well, the problem with Rosatom is that it's not just the Europeans who heavily depend on this, but also I think more than a third goes to the US still. And that is, it's a bit of contradictory. Well, I mean, they ask us for a good reason to sanction each and everyone who deals with Russian companies. When it comes to Rosatom, they're very vulnerable. And that's also a bit hypocritical, so to say. But yes, maybe that was one of the good reasons why we phased out of nuclear power. Olena, if you're still there, since Ina has not made it so far, she will connect a bit later, I'm afraid. From the Ukrainian perspective, I mean, if you hear this, what is your expectation? Where would you see the most need for support from the international community to fight and to counter this ecocide, this large extent, this very deep rooted now, as both of our speakers from Germany have mentioned? That is a long standing. This will not go away in a couple of years. This will live with Ukraine for decades now. But from your perspective as an ecology expert, where is the urgent need now? Where would you see us to support Ukraine at first?
At first, of course, thank you so much for this question. And I support previous speakers that we to sanction Zaporizhzhya area. It's very important. The second, we need support from EU countries to continue real reform, because Ukraine does not have enough capacity to gather facts of ecocide and to analyze all facts. It's very important for the future because it's very difficult to understand what happened now in Ukraine. We have a lot of damage. We are talking about ecocide, but the first step is take step by step all facts, all damage, all impact of war for nature. And for this, we need a lot of capacity for environmental enforcement. And we need to provide reform for environmental enforcement, for environmental monitoring. And then we have to think about compensation for nature for future. What should it be? Should it be a compensation committee, or like for Kuwait, or it should be another mechanism of compensation for especially for nature? It's the first and the second step for us, because without real modern pro-European enforcement, environmental monitoring, it's difficult to take all facts and to go to the national court or international court or to compensation committee, something like that.
Yes, that was exactly what I meant. Ina, I saw you could connect. I don't know. Oh, there she is. Very good. Thank you so much.
I'm literally still in the plane.
No, it's okay. But you have heard maybe the last remarks of Olena, and you were speaking yesterday in Brussels while I couldn't be present, unfortunately, but I heard what you said, and you were very much focused on the situation in Ukraine, but also on the need, what you would see, what needs to be done by the EU, by us. Maybe you can repeat this a little bit and focus also on the institutional needs of what would you see as a priority now for Ukraine? And thanks a lot for being so flexible here. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the invite. I might need to switch off my camera if I will have to leave the plane as I talk. Sorry, so much sorry for that. My plane is 40 minutes late. This was the most stressful plane ride in my life. So I will continue shortly on what Olena was saying. As I understand the question that you asked was about what needs to be done. And I think indeed, following up again on what Elena just said, we don't just need support in reforming the environmental sector, but it's also critically important to provide financial and technical support to investigate the crimes against the environment that are being held by the Russians. And I think that is critically important, and that is something that is a very practical issue at hand. Because I've heard from a colleague of mine yesterday who was working a lot on environmental issues, that in order to prove that dolphins in the Black Sea have been killed as the result of mines, though the bodies of the killed dolphins are being taken to Denmark because Ukraine doesn't have the labs that would actually help establish the fact that they have died because of the bombs explosions. And this is just a minor issue, but there are multiple issues like this where helps in terms of laboratories, in terms of personnel to collect all the data would be critically important. And I think this is probably the step zero of any further steps on establishing justice for the ecocide crimes that are being connected. It's just to trace the evidence. And then Ukraine, of course, doesn't have the capacity to do this. We probably didn't have it before, but I think not a single country would have the capacity to investigate crimes of such of such level. So that is truly where we need to get together and to understand what can be done specifically in order to investigate the crimes. Another issue that I should mention is legislative initiatives. So there is a debate about including the crime of ecocide into national legislatures, but also there is a trialogue inside the EU institutions about including the crime of ecocide in the list of EU environmental crimes. I understand this is a slightly political debate. I had a touch feeling of that in Brussels the last 2 days. I understand not everybody wants to include this as a separate crime, but I think the extent of what is happening in Ukraine right now proves once again that this is a really equal to genocide, because I do believe, from what my assistant who was listening to the event from the very beginning told me, that majority of those crimes have already been have been listed, but it's a huge crime that we need to be able to have legal mechanisms to fight against. That is why I think it is critically important to change legislation as well. And then, of course, we have to think about including the crime of ecocide to the responsibility under the International Criminal Tribunal for Russia. That is also critically important, because what they did and what they continue doing, because it's really important to understand that any numbers we would have right now are the numbers that will be changing, because new crimes are being committed literally every single day. So we really have to think about the numbers will change, unfortunately, but there needs to be a proper responsibility mechanism. So I think
I let you embark and exit first.
Yeah.
Exit, exactly. And maybe Tobias can give us a little bit of an intro on what the monitoring situation looks like, and whether you, Greenpeace, other NGOs, whether there are other European partners who will pick up this topic or have already an order to do so. How would you see this? Is there money in this program to help to support Ukraine? Will there be laboratories, as Ina has said, for example, to monitor the dolphins? There was a question in the Q&A asking what kind of consequences would this war have for the Black Sea as such. I don't know who of you could maybe also answer to the written question, but maybe Tobias, you first.
Yeah, thank you. So Greenpeace is on the ground since last spring, you could say, and we have started to document environmental crime in Chernobyl with the mission. There's another mission planned for later this year as well. We have understood that there are many institutions and NGOs working on Kakhovka, so we will probably not take part in this aspect. But we have this nuclear expertise, which is quite unique, and we will focus very much on that. That's the one angle of our work. The other angle is to show with very practical projects what is possible in terms of green reconstruction on the short term already. A very prominent example was the green rehabilitation of a hospital in Horenka, which is in Bucha, which was visited by Minister of Economy Robert Habeck at the beginning of April. And we will do more such projects with communities in Ukraine in the coming weeks and months. Also in order to inspire and influence the Ukrainian government. So on the one side, of course, we want to reach the international financial institutions, the European Investment Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the World Bank and IMF, and also the bilateral institutions like KfW from Germany, and governments, but we understand that as at least as important it is to influence the debate in Ukraine, and also to get inspired people in the presidential administration of Mr. Zelensky, of President Zelensky. So for that, to get into dialogue, we will do both this documentation of environmental crime and also to show demonstration projects, what is possible. But we will also want to work politically, and there I would like to come back to Rosatom. Anton Hofreiter had mentioned that as a possible instrument to work here. I understand. I mean, this has been debated for some months at least. I understand there is a lot of resistance within the European Union, especially in the nuclear countries, especially in France. But my impression it is of such an importance that it should become a real top priority issue for German-French relations. Yeah? It should be an issue which should be debated and negotiated between France and a couple of non-nuclear countries, including Germany, because I cannot understand that we are talking about sanctions, and we have sanctions against a lot of Russian companies, but this company, which is this is proven, which has been included into the war planning, yeah, which has been at the front line of the invasion from day one on, yeah, that this company is exempt is unacceptable and not understandable. And I think that would be a very interesting issue also for the Greens, with their possibilities in Brussels, but also in Berlin, to push for sanctions against Rosatom. Over.
Absolutely. Tono, you want to react on that? And maybe also on this question, what Ina has risen before, the question of whether there is a chance to create the separate crime for ecocide, environmental crimes, since this is actually close to genocidal character as we have seen it in the past weeks. So please, maybe all the questions which were risen during the last round, please, Tony.
To have special against the crime of ecocide, I'm not sure if it will be possible to push this through, because we still have problems with a special tribunal, which is also needed. But I totally agree that we should try to push harder for it, because especially also this crime will have long-lasting consequences. And then we come to the other question of the sanctions. I totally agree with Tobias Münchmeyer, but as you already said, Viola, we have not only the problem with France, we have also the problem with some Eastern European countries, and not only with Hungary, but also with Slovakia, for example. And we have the problem with the US. The US always, and I'm really thankfully what the United States already have done. They are by far the most important supporter of Ukraine. But when it comes to Rosatom, which is a really criminal government-owned company, which, as already said, is from the beginning on acting in this war, US becomes very, very silent. But still, we should push in this direction. And in Azovstal, I'm personally, we already tried several things. I think we had something together in the news paper here in Germany, and we will continue to push on. We had yesterday a meeting in our committee with the embassy of Ukraine, where we also discussed it, if we can push in the direction of sanctions. So we will continue to push, but we will have fully to be aware that it's not only some countries, but it's really a lot of countries who are against sanctions on Rosatom, and also very powerful like US and France.
So Ina, now it's your turn again. You said you can comment on the situation of the Black Sea, but if there's anything else from your side, please go ahead. And
I think I will first just add to the discussion about sanctions about Rosatom, because indeed, as Tony did mention, we did co-author an article in the German media, and I also initiated an address by the Ukrainian parliament to the parliaments of other countries about sanctions against Rosatom, because that is indeed just the Poland, the lack of any work in that direction, that everybody just ignores this, and that the European Union countries are still using about 30% of Russian enriched uranium, which is unacceptable. And there is even, and I understand that with enriched uranium, the major problem is that it's very difficult to get to new sources. It's not something that you can get relatively quickly, but the sooner you start, the sooner you will get the result, right? So if you don't start, it will still be like, producing new uranium in new plants will be 18 months. So this will be 18 months, regardless of when you start. It doesn't matter when you start. And the problem is that from talking to the business community, even that I asked, what will it take to change the situation for you to start producing enriched uranium in other countries? Because, for instance, France has capacity to enrich uranium, which it underuses. It uses about, I think about 50% of its enrichment capacity plants. But the thing is, why they continue to buy Russian enriched uranium is because it's cheaper. So it's literally just because it's cheaper. So in order to stop this, and in order for nuclear plants in France to buy French enriched uranium, which they have capacity to produce. The companies just need to invest in production. But in order to invest, they need to be sure that they will not invest and then in half a year, suddenly, nuclear plants will continue buying enriched uranium again from Russia. So we need sanctions, and we need the sanctions to be specified. They will last at least 10 years, because then it makes it financially reasonable for other companies to increase production of enriched uranium. That is critically important. You cannot say we will sanction Rosatom for 1 year, because that will not do the job. So this is critically important, and it is, of course, it's critically important to start as soon as possible. Second, I think it's also important to note that well, enriched uranium is one thing, but the problem is that Rosatom is, of course, building new nuclear power blocks in other countries, including European Union, in Hungary. So that's the leverage that they will continue to have in it for all those countries for years and years to come. So this is another level of problem that we really have to stop. And I cannot think about the specific leverage that can be inside the European Union. I understand the unanimity principle is kind of a big problem with Hungary on many levels, not just regarding Rosatom or Ukraine in general. But something needs to be done, because the building new nuclear power blocks, it means that this country will be connected to Russia for years and years to come. So this is just extremely dangerous situation. So I'm very passionate about sanctions for Rosatom. I think there is not enough attention being paid to that, and I do indeed think that there is a space for the Greens specifically for the German Greens, to be to make it your major issue. And I think that for obvious reasons. One thing I will add, based on my talks in Brussels, I did talk to some people from the French delegation, and they did tell me that there is some progress in France in terms of diversifying their sources of enriched uranium. So they understand the problem, they're trying to do some work on that. So this is good, but if you continue talking to them and put more pressure onto them, I definitely think that this will help them diversify sooner, So this is one piece of news that I'm bringing from Brussels with me. And then I will stop on Rosatom here, but I will add shortly about the situation with the Black Sea. Well, I'm not an environmental scientist, but I did follow closely on the situation with the Black Sea in regards to the situation with the Kakhovka Dam destruction. So I will, and as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but based on what my assistant texted me, there was not a large discussion about the environmental impact of Kakhovka Dam explosion. So I will comment on the influence on the Black Sea, but then also some additional information on that, because this is critically important. This is the biggest environmental catastrophe we have had in the course of this war, and well, on the territory of Ukraine, definitely since the Chernobyl explosion. So in terms of the Black Sea, the data that I could find was there is definitely an influence on impact one is 150 tons of oil leaked because of the dam explosion. And it all goes to the Black Sea, apparently. Second impact that is being detected now, the salinity level of the Black Sea near Odessa is nearly 3 times lower than the norm. So this will clearly have a very intense and very immense effect on the flora and fauna of the Black Sea, and which I'm sure environment scientists can explain better than me. Another issue in terms of Kakhovka Dam explosion that needs to be mentioned is the influence it will have on people. As of right now, 800,000 people are cut off from the water supply. 800,000 people. So that's big. And that will have a huge impact on the agricultural sector. And I think overall, when we speak about environmental effect of this war, I think effect it has on the agriculture, cannot be underestimated. It's huge. So because of Kakhovka Dam destruction by Russians, area which provided 14% of all Ukrainian grains and legumes is now cut off from irrigation. This will not have influence only on Ukraine and on food supply in Ukraine, but given the importance of the whole region for production of grain, which goes all over the world, this will have further influence for the rest of the world as well. So I think those are the influences that we have to keep in mind when we talk about this. And I'm afraid that more are to come, because of course we still don't understand what the influence would be on Zaporizhzhya nuclear power plant. Zaporizhzhya nuclear power plant now it doesn't have water to cool off the blocks. It's kind of difficult to predict whether this will be the biggest problem with the Zaporizhzhya nuclear power plant, unfortunately. But this again is one of the issues that we also need to keep in mind. So yeah, I think I'll stop here for the time being.
Super, Ina. I know that Tony has to leave a bit earlier. You came a bit later. So Tony, in case you would like to add or make your final remarks, you're very welcome to do so.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the invitation to this webinar, and thanks also a lot for the work Ina Sovson and Olena Kravchenko are doing, because it's really very important work during wartime. And I think we have to do in total, even if people sometimes become tired of it, we have to do more to support Ukraine. We have to deliver more weapons, as sad as this is, but we have to do it. We have clearly to explain to Russia that we don't accept and that it's a red line to attack nuclear power plants. And I think we had to push harder, and especially we German Greens has to push harder and we totally know about the problems that we come to sanctions against the nuclear sector of Russia, which is one of the most problematic and which still try to use his power in the West, in the Russian sense. And I think that we also has to push for justice when this war ends, because I think it's really important for the victims that we not say when hopefully as fast as possible we come closer to a kind of peace. I think it's never good for the victims when we say now we forget everything which happened during the war. So I think a priority is to push for justice. I think it's really for a long-lasting peace, it's always important to push for justice.
Fully agree. Thank you so much, Tony, for making it possible and taking the time in that very important moment. And Uli Kindermann wrote in the chat, we speak at least about 500,000 hectares of irrigated land, soil, which can't properly used or which is affected and contaminated by the Kakhovka blowing up. So that is, I mean, a number of land which hardly is to be to imagine. Yes, and what you have said, we have to do more. We have to make sure that we can liberate, that Ukraine can liberate its territory, that it can determine, that it can make sure that we can even start with some of the measures which were being mentioned here. Absolutely right. And I mean, we had this London conference on the reconstruction, on the restoring. Thank you so much, and talk to you soon. And there, of course, it was a topic, but as some of you have mentioned, still it's not the priority. But nevertheless, what we spoke about, to make it as a separate crime and a legislative act, to make sure that we make the Russians pay for that, to really speak more about the sanctions on Rosatom. This is all possible, but in the end, we need money and we need people who can help Ukrainians to reverse the damage in those cases where damage can be reversed and compensated. And maybe this would be my last round now to Olena, if you still can hear me. What kind of partnerships do you have, and what kind of partnerships you're seeking for? I mean, we have heard from Tobias, they become very active, they're ready to support, they're applying for funds. But in terms of, and Inga said, we need definitely something like laboratories, we need to have more monitoring units to get a better overview of where we stand with some of the, let's say, soil and fauna. But in terms of partnerships, do you have contacts to the bigger environmental agencies or organization, or what concretely would help you for this?
It would be very nice if we could cooperate more with Greenpeace. We know that Greenpeace is interested a lot of what happened with our nature in Ukraine. We can share our experience because we are working with this issue, war impact for nature from 2014. And we have a lot of already analytical documents in this area. We can share our experience, and of course, we are open for new ideas about Ecocide, and of course we know a lot of problem with definition of Ecocide in national legislation and international level, and it would be nice if we could advocate a good definition for, I don't know, maybe some separate convention on Ecocide. It would be very nice, like we have a convention on genocide. Or we can advocate this idea for Rome Statute or for another issue. We know that a lot of there are a lot of initiative about Ecocide. But for our organization, like full organization, it's just more process for process. We need concrete result. We need this definition strong and clear in international environmental law and Ukrainian domestic law. It's the first idea. The second idea, we can make together with environmental NGO from EU, from Germany, to make some expedition to different, for example, national protection area and to analyze what happened.
These are the Carpathian Mountains. Actually, I know that Ukrainian has a better digital connection in general, but Tobias, before she comes back, people are very much afraid of an immediate threat coming from the Zaporizhzhya nuclear power plant. And maybe you can go a little bit more into detail. What is your guess here? Is Russia ready to indirectly attack that, to cut off the cooling, to make sure that, as you said, even this the 6 stations are already out of work, but still need to be cooled, that there will be a very slow Kernschmelze, how would you say this?
Meltdown.
Yeah, meltdown, exactly. Sorry, meltdown. I should know this. Is that a realistic scenario? And how can we help? How can you help? How can we put pressure on the International Atomic Energy Agency? And I mean, there's no nervousness. I mean, yes, people buy some tablets, Yodit's tablet, but not as you would expect the population would react. But nevertheless, if the wind turns into the other direction, not to the south, but to the north, what's your guess? What's your take here?
So it's very, very speculative. And when you ask what is likely, what would the Russians do? I mean, this is bringing us back to February last year. Yeah, would the Russians really dare to invade Ukraine? Would they dare to do this? Would they dare to do that? And most of the time, the answer was yes, they would do it, and they have done it. That's the very depressing and frightening experience we have made over the month, including Kakhovka. Yeah, many people said, "What if there is a mine, and what if they are using the mines to explode it?" And then they did it at one point. So it's very, very speculative. But since they have the full physical control over the plant, there are so many scenarios. The most primitive and frightening would be, yeah, I mean, to explode reactors or cooling ponds. Of course, that is possible, which would be then a release of radioactivity of large amounts immediately. For some reasons, many people who are dealing with these issues, they believe more that a rationale could be on the Russian side, not really to destroy it themselves, but to create a very unstable situation, which could create panic and so on. For instance, destroying the cooling pond would not mean that the fuel elements and the reactors would melt right away, but would make it more difficult to cool the fuel. What is more of a concern in the scientific community is actually the loss of power, which is used for the pumps to operate the cooling of the reactors. And we know that the power plant nearby is out of coal, is out of fuel, so is not supplying the Zaporizhzhya nuclear power plant with power. So there's only one electricity line is still existing, which is supplying the plant from the Ukrainian side. On top of that, there are diesel generators on the ground, but if they run out of fuel at some day, if the power would be cut, then this is a matter of hours until the cooling cannot be guaranteed anymore. So that could result, but I don't want to create panic into overheating of fuel, and at a certain moment melting of fuel and melting of the zirconium layers around the fuel elements in a matter of days, which in the very end could result also into a hydrogen explosion and into large release of radioactivity. It's a lot about the psychological effect and the fear which could be caused. But as I said, the loss of cooling water from the cooling pond could even be kind of compensated by using the Dnieper River, the Dnipro River, which is still, of course, on a lower level, but still obviously having water. But it would require also from the Ukrainian government so much brain power and so much attention to this potential crisis that this would be also a factor in the whole war situation. Yeah. Last point, just as a footnote about iodine. Iodine preparation is very, very important when we're talking about a nuclear accident at an operable and operating nuclear power plant. All 6 reactors are not operating and therefore do not have iodine. So this short half-lifetime isotopes in the reactor cores, and therefore iodine preparation is not needed and is not required, and people who are recommending that, yeah, actually recommend something which is not useful. The only lesson can be then in the case of such a dramatic event to shield the people. So that means either to yeah, get as far as possible from the reactors, or to at least shut the windows and doors and to shield in the homes. Over.
Yep, that's what I've heard as well. So Olena has risen her hand. Olena, you want to come in? And I would say this is then also the final round. Yes, please go ahead, and then Ina would get the floor next.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but my internet
all good.
Is not so good. Another idea, we talked today about laboratories for Ukraine. I'm not sure that now it's the best idea. Why? Because we have post-Soviet old environmental enforcement system, and the first we need to change to make this reform, and then already buy new laboratories. The first. The second, our environmental enforcement system does not have authority to go to territory which we have some damage with nature, and to take facts and analyze. And it means that we will have problem when our environmental inspectorate will decide to go to the court. It will be a big problem, because we have to take all facts according domestic law, and our environmental enforcement does not have this authority, and it's a big problem. And we are talking about this problem from 2014. So the first we need to make reform, and then to help with laboratory and with new skills how to use this new laboratory, because a lot of employee does not have any idea. And the UNDP, for example, already decided to buy some new laboratory for Ukrainian environmental inspectorate, and they ask environmental NGO to write tour what should be what should they buy, and which kind of chemical, how to say, so a lot of all things for laboratory should be new, and employee does not know what should be in this laboratory and how to use it. And one of the most corruption in environmental it's environmental inspectorate. So the first reform, the second money to help to take this facts of damage of nature, to analyze, etc., etc. I think it's the most important things to make reform, to analyze Ukrainian domestic environmental law, and then to help with money. And of course, we need financial reform for environmental sphere. Without this financial reform, we will have the same situation like in Bosnia and Herzegovina, when US, when EU gave huge money for recovery, and nothing happened till now. So it's very important that thank you so much that you want to help, but the first reform, the second money to help us. And the last sentence is not all damage is dangerous for nature. For example, Ukrainian military destroyed dam in Irpin River. It's very good for river. And we don't need rebuild new dam in Irpin River. And the same with Kakhovka issue. A lot of environmentalists have another idea that rebuild immediately a new dam in Kakhovka. And we already had some expedition in National Protection Area Park Kamenskaya Sich, it's Kherson region. And some place some part of nature already decided recovery without our help. So we have to be very carefully analyze and decide and to write a green recovery plan very carefully with love of nature. Thank you.
I like your approach. I think this is so important to have people like you on the ground who absolutely know the situation in detail and who give us the right hints and advice. And I'm more than open to go into detail, especially what you have said at the beginning. Start with the domestic reforms, make sure that our authorities can absorb the money, make sure that there is no corruption in the game and so on. I fully agree. I see the danger, absolutely. And I'm more than happy to visit you in the Carpathian Mountains, to have a half day of consultations of what needs to be done, because absolutely, I mean, we do not want to spend the money for nothing. And there's a big danger in some of the sectors. Thank you so much. Now, Ina, you have the last word for this session now.
Okay, I'll probably start by following up on what Olena just said. When I talked about the need for labs, I didn't talk about just the need for labs. I meant the whole capacity of the government to collect data and to collect information. And of course, capacity does not mean just technical stuff and just material stuff. It also means institutional stuff. And there I fully agree with Olena. The question is to what extent Ukrainian governmental institutions have the capacity to do this, be it because of corruption or because of lack of professionals in the sphere. That is, of course, critically important. And I fully agree with the analysis that Olena gives, that we have to increase the governmental capacity to do their work in analyzing the situation in the environmental sphere. And I would probably go even a step further. We don't just need increased capacity for analyzing the current situation. We also need the increased capacity for planning for the green recovery, because what I am extremely concerned with is that there are huge plans. Let's rebuild what we had. Let's rebuild the huge dam that we had. Is that the most environmentally friendly approach? That is a big question. So, I am very much concerned that there is lack of capacity in designing such huge projects that we will have to do in Ukraine after the victory. So this is indeed a huge problem, which should be the topic of another webinar, which I promise not to be late to. So I think that this is, so I am concerned about this myself as well. The governmental capacity is something that we started with and that we should continue talking about, because without it, we cannot get the punishment for the crimes committed, and we cannot rebuild what was destroyed. We cannot even plan what needs to be rebuilt. And in that line of thought, I would
Looks like a European train connection that doesn't provide the best. There she is.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you, but very poorly. But now it's better. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Yeah. So one last point is about renewables. because this should be the part of the big green recovery plan. What I am concerned with is that we plan, the government announces immense plans. We shall build new nuclear, we shall build renewables, we shall build everything. It all truly doesn't look systemic. So I do believe that increasing capacity of the non-governmental sector to analyze what the government proposes as energy recovery is hugely important, because without it, we plan to build new nuclear power blocks in the country. We still don't have the plan to move Russia to another planet. So, like, how can we plan for new nuclear being built is unthinkable to me, truly. So that is a point to make. And last point, in terms of the help that is needed, more direct help. And Tobias did mention this shortly, but I would just point out the need for water in the area on the south is critically important, both for agriculture, for people, for industry, for the Zaporizhzhya nuclear power plant. Ukraine has so far dedicated something like 50 million euros for recovery, for restoring some of the water supplies, but that's not nearly enough. And we still have 800,000 people without, constant water supply. So that is something that needs to be addressed, as a separate issue on itself, restoring water supply, at least to the people, and then thinking about better irrigation systems in the region. I've actually started reading a book about how they built irrigation system in Israel, and clearly should learn from the best irrigation systems in the world, not just rebuild the old ones, which were
Okay, irrigation system, and then it stopped. Before she comes back, Tobias, you raised your hand. You want to come into?
Exactly. So that was very interesting what Ina just said. And that is matching with our observations that the Ukrainian government, at this point at least, I mean, obviously dealing with thousands of issues at the same time. And so I have some respect for that also. But at this point of time, when they're speaking about the energy system of the future, they think and they speak about everything, enlarging this, enlarging that. Yes, renewables, enormous figures, nuclear enormous figures, coal, gas, everything. And this is not a strategy. This is, I don't know, a wish list of
a screenshot of that I'm talking about.
A wish list of a child, but not a strategy. And I was wondering if you have a sense who actually in the Ukrainian government, is it all only in the president's administration, or is it among the ministries, or who are the, let's say, key figures in this debate one could try to talk with, to get in touch with? Yeah. So we would be, as Greenpeace, very, very interested to get into a dialogue about a systemic solution for the future. So maybe you can help us here. Thank you.
Ina, can you try to reply and finish the other?
Yes,
okay.
I can. I'm happy to know that you understand the problem, to put it mildly. Planning to build 7 times more generation that we have right now, it's just ridiculous. It's not just unprofessional, it's just ridiculous, So I'm happy that people took notice of that. The plans have been developed. How do I be diplomatic on that matter? I would say that we need to talk to the president's office. It's not within the ministry. It's with the president's office, and I think we can coordinate on that outside of the online event. I would be happy to stay in touch. I think that one issue where Greenpeace, the people who care about this in the EP, and then everybody else involved should address is that, well, we do have an energy strategy that we have that was approved by the government. which is kept secret, which is ridiculous.
Right.
And that something needs to be done about that. And yeah, we as members of parliament are trying to work on that, but additional pressure on the international non-governmental organizations and you know, other powerful forces like Viola would definitely help us in disclosing the strategy and then having a proper analysis of this, because right now it's just yeah, it's basically like having no strategy. It means there will be no proper recovery at all.
Right. Yeah, would be great to get in touch. Thank you.
All right. So there were a couple of remarks by Uli Kindermann in the chat and the Q&A, but no particular questions. That's why I think we can wrap up. And it's my turn to thank you all. Thank you, Ina, for jumping in right after you have landed. Thanks, Olena, for preparing the slides. We will share them in the show notes under the link of our webinar. Thanks a lot for Tobias' contribution, for being so engaged, and I think you will be a big bridge from the German side, from the European side, for Ukrainians, for activists, but also for professionals who look for competent people to speak with. Tony, of course, he is always available. He is always at our disposal, and that is a great team. That's good to know that there are a couple of very well-known people, competent people, and I know we need many more to build this network of people who look for other opportunities to support Ukraine on renewables, on this cleaning up the contamination of all the oil, air, soil, air, and water, what we have spoken about. Thank you all, and stay healthy, stay brave. And Olena, I would love to meet you in the Carpathian Mountain. It looks so nice in the background. Talk to you soon.
Very welcome.
Yes, Ina, have a good and safe travel, and Tobias, have a good weekend as well. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.